Welcome to Contra Gentile, Season 2, Episode 26.
If you didn't know the form of the heart, what you pushing up your ass?
I made bruschetta and it's really good.
Truth will essentially just reveal itself to the
Right,
audience.
Did we say that
Yeah.
I'm predisposed to like sex toys, man?
Quit being a fag.
That's a lot.
It is.
Anyway, so how's life?
Good. I want the wine.
Oh, yeah. So today's wine is a Saldo Zinfandel. It does not even say what year it is. Is that
You said 40. You said $46 though, right?
It was like a $45.
So that's a good like mid-range.
It's a 15.5% alcohol, so it's a little bit higher too.
Wow,
But
okay.
yeah, the label is literally just it. What is that kind of label maker called again?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Dymo.
Dymo,
It's a
yes.
Dymo label.
Yeah.
It's a Dymo label that says Saldo, and the only other thing on here is the back, the little tiny barcode. It really just doesn't even say what year it is.
Wow.
I don't know anything about it. Anyway. Are you supposed to pour wine this violently? Is that normal? Is that good etiquette?
I don't know actually.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah, I forgot my laptop, so we're recording on this iMac to my right, and it has me really paranoid. It should be good, though, but
Yes. Cheers.
it's the first time our recording software has changed.
Should be the same since the equipment. The
You
mic
should
can
turn your
actually.
mic just barely towards down. There you go.
Okay.
Beautiful. Okay, so I need to banter for a little bit. Oh, I have news.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible news. The wicked bitch of the upstairs is moved out. She's gone.
Oh, good.
Many new listeners might not know that I had a horrible ethnic woman living above me who was loud, but every night for 13 months in a window between 3 a.m. to whenever I had to go to work every day. And I don't have her there anymore. So that's a huge deal that I get to sleep now. Yeah. You've been less bantery recently.
I have. Maybe because we actually have like topics to talk about.
I know, but I want to talk to you.
Okay.
People care about you, Jeremy. People want to know how you're doing.
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
I like talking about myself.
I don't. Yes.
You've spent how many hours talking about yourself on the podcast?
I don't though. We normally talk about ideas.
I know.
I very rarely say anything about me. That's why. That's why listeners are like, "Oh, he's a robot."
I'll put a compilation of top 10 facts to know about Jeremy from listening to Contra Gentile, and you'll be shocked. His mom used to beat him if he didn't sleep.
So those ones are funny stories.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I want to hear a funny story. Is your life really that boring right now?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, my. Sure.
Yeah.
It's like, Amanda, help. Entertain me.
Now I've always been horrible in small talk.
No, I know.
Like if I go to somebody's house, they have like a house party or whatever. We always have that person that could just like tell stories, and I'm not. I'm just sitting there and.
Oh, that's me.
Is it? Yeah.
Incredible at talking.
Yeah.
So I never shut up. It's pathological.
But if they start talking about an interesting topic or idea, and then I start talking, that's just the way that it is. I find more interest in that than.
Oh, what was the thing that was happening? I work in a medical office, and no one there's a genius. So it's not.
Yeah.
I'm not. No one. Is this coffee grounds? Bits of coffee ground in this?
No, those are.
But it feels like coffee grounds.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, if you get a bit of it. Here, man, have you had one?
No, it
you want another one?
tastes like those little bits of cookies. The like cookies and cream stuff.
I know, but the texture is like coffee grounds.
Yeah.
You just don't even want to eat it now?
I already had some.
Oh my God. Jeremy's fighting, having a good time the whole time.
I'm not. I'm having a great time drinking wine.
This isn't bad.
Yeah.
It's very dry,
Yes.
extremely, which is interesting for a Zinfandel. No, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I just don't want to. I don't want to launch right into it. Keep them edging for a little bit. Yeah, I should have brought the gin too. Just take shots. Because I think that's what it was. Is you'll talk about yourself once you're intoxicated. Anyway, you're not engaging me, so let's go into it. Today. What? How long? I don't even know how long we've been recording. I don't know how to tell. 168 bars
There you
at
go.
120 beats per minute.
Yes.
If anyone wants to do the math. Today, we would like to topically address a question that arose or is commonly disputed amongst religious circles and non-religious circles regarding Catholicism and the nature of religion kind of generally, and also was something I heard a lot of people say about our discussion of sexual personae,
Right. Yes.
which is paganism, and what paganism is.
Yeah.
What is pagan? What isn't pagan?
Yeah.
Which systems of religion can you describe as pagan? Which ones aren't?
Yeah, and I think a large part of it was just that we probably took for granted that our idea was so true that we didn't need to explain it. But I think I really do think it needs explanation because it isn't the common belief. And sometimes you tend to forget that. If it's not the common belief, it's like people are saying, like, what the fuck are you saying? That's not what I heard, or that's not my experience with it. And so there's reasons why I would say we say what we say. And so hopefully this kind of at least clears that up. Whether somebody still wants to dispute it is fine. But but at least you could, put into light why we make claims of Protestantism and paganism having a closer link to one another
Than Catholicism.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Well, so you said you had some stuff that you...
I have the questions I think should be answered.
Okay.
I have like 6 or 7.
Okay.
So I was trying to write notes at work, but I didn't end up having enough time to do like a ton.
Yeah.
I have 5. So it's obviously important if you're going to discuss something like this, you have to define what the hell paganism is.
Yes.
When we're talking about it. What is it?
Yeah, so I think more like the way that I wrote it down, I think classically, paganism normally referring to like pre-Christian European Gentile religions. Like it's a very specific thing, right? They do have certain qualities that they all share that I think gets added more, but classically speaking, that's what it was. And so there was like heathenry and there was paganism. So the term heathen came from like the Norsemen, and then
eventually pagan was used to refer to heathens, but that's not where it comes from.
Right, that's not what it comes. Yeah. And then paganism comes from the Latin word, paganus, but it mostly referred to the people of the Gentile people and their religion. And so
paganus means of the peasants, essentially.
Something,
of the country folk.
Yes,
which comes from pagus, which was the Roman term for rural communities outside of the cities.
Yes, yeah.
So it literally just means of the rural people.
Yes, yeah.
Because Christianity came to prominence in Roman communities in the cities first.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think heathenry has been used interchangeably with paganism many times. It depends which text, but overall, there was kind of maybe it was more of a colloquial use, but when you do read some historical texts, they normally use the word heathen to refer to like African and Eastern polytheistic type of religions. And then pagans was normally used for referring to the European pagan
into the Middle East.
Yeah, into the Middle East, right? Yeah. And this is not to confuse like the Far East Asia. So normally pantheism was not considered pagan necessarily. Some writers did. I shouldn't say nobody. Some writers did. I think even Aquinas called the Far Eastern religions pagan. But I think classically speaking, many historians wanted to separate like the pantheistic religions like of the Native Americans and of the Far Eastern religions not being necessarily pagan, but they have their own category on its own. And so in researching of pagan, the thing about pagan religions is that it isn't as if it's similar to like Mohammedanism or Christianity, where there's like a systematic philosophical, I guess, description of its beliefs. It isn't as if there's a pagan catechism. And so paganism is actually very loose in its descriptions.
Well, it's a description. It's not not referring to something.
Right.
Specific.
Yes. And many of our understandings of the pagan religions just come from narratives, And so there's a lot of, like Homeric traditions. You could read the Iliad, you could read the Odyssey. Euthyphro, the Socratic text, Euthyphro, at least they believe that, historically speaking, they believe he was a real person. He was like this pagan prophet, Athenian pagan prophet and everything. And so this is why Socrates went to talk to him, because he wanted to talk to a prophet. But yeah, so many of the ideas that are derived of our understanding of paganism come from these narratives. And then we begin to dissect and try to comprehend what in the world they really believed, because it wasn't a systematic thought.
It's an umbrella term. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so when I was like writing my notes, I think there are certain things that all the pagan religions shared, whether the Romans, the Greeks, or the Norse gods. They all shared in some basic fundamental beliefs of why we begin to describe them this way. So one of them is metaphysical dualism, right? This is the idea that there's two substances. I know, so it might sound like but I think there's many people that
don't really know what dualism is.
Yeah, don't really know what we're talking about.
And if they do talk about dualism, they might be discussing it wrong.
Yes, yeah. And so the important aspect of metaphysical dualism is that there is a belief that there's two independent substances. There's form and there's matter, or there's material, immaterial, there's a body and soul, spirit, whatever. But there's two independent realities that kind of coexist with one another.
And are dependent on each other to differing degrees.
No, this is a difference within within dualism. They're not really dependent on each other at all.
They're just accidentally.
Yes, they're just accidentally there, and that the body's dependent on the soul in this way, and so the body's like a vehicle that is being driven by the soul.
But souls don't need a body because they exist separate from them.
Exactly, yeah. And so there is this almost hierarchical view of reality, that the immaterial substance is greater than the material substance, because the material substance is kind of inanimate without the immaterial substance, and that the immaterial substance exists prior and beyond the material substance. And so this is kind of a central part within with all pagan religions, right? It is that you have this separation. So, and you read this within many things. So if you read Homeric writings, you talk about Hades. There's the underworld in which you die and your spirit or your soul gets in there. If you read more philosophically inclined thinkers like Plato, writing in context of Socrates, like Socrates had this theory that that there's just souls that were floating, and that they infuse like the world. And so the Socratic method is really the idea that your soul already knows everything, and through questioning and through conversation, you could bring out a recollection of what is known by the soul, what is known by the mind. And so there always exists this like separation between these two entities that kind of exist, but inexplicably exists. And obviously we don't have to get into the philosophical issues with that, but like the mind-body problem derives because of this dualistic view of reality. And so that is like one of the main tenets of the paganistic worldview, the pagan religion.
It's a feature they share.
Yes. Yeah. The other one was the ensumum gods, right? The idea that the gods were just bigger than us.
Yeah.
Right? And so
big people.
Yeah, they're big people. There's Zeus, who's more strong than us. There's Apollo, the messenger god, but who also was representative of the more virtuous of us.
They know.
They know things.
Like God is all-knowing. God is all-powerful. God
Right,
is
yes.
omnipresent.
Yes, yeah.
He's more present than we are.
Yes, yeah. That basically they have similar qualities in ours, but just bigger. It's like there's more of it. They're really strong. They're really fast. They're everything beyond us, and so they're basically existing entities in the world that are encompassing the world that that partake within similar qualities, and they have their own wars, they have their own jealousies, they have whatever, right? Murderous ones, and so the idea of an ensumum god, the idea of the biggest being or big beings, anyways, that exist in the world, but they just have better qualities than we do. The third one is fate. And so fate is, again, it's just a very central part of all pagan religions. And so it's the idea that we are destined for a certain end, that, what's that, like Oedipus Rex, right? The idea that he was supposed to, kill his father and then like fuck his mom and then gouge his eyes out. And it's almost like the central theme of living is acceptance of the fate. It's like you have to
destiny.
You have to accept the destiny, and you have to live. Yeah, you have to live the destiny, and you can't like run away from it. No matter how hard you try to run away from it, it's going to catch up to you. And so, the idea of fate is just a central part of it. And the last one I have is divine command theory of morals. And that is the idea that, like the quote that I put here, it was written in Euthyphro, is it pious because it is loved by the gods, or is it loved by the gods because it is pious? And so, like, this question that he was asking him, was asking Euthyphro, was because Euthyphro was positing that things are pious because they are loved by the gods. It's that the gods instantiate piety, they instantiate virtue of any sort. That virtue is dictated by the gods. So this is why, depending on which god you begin to have a festival or whatever with, so if you're worshiping, having a worship of the god Dionysus, you're going to be drunk, you're going to have an orgy, bestiality, whatever. It's that you are partaking.
Those are all good because they're
instantiated by Dionysus, right? If you do it with Apollo, it's going to be different. You're worshiping Zeus, blah, blah, blah. All of the qualities are instantiated by the gods. And so virtue is separate from the gods, and in that way, they stand above and beyond them. They're not beholden by the virtues. Mm-hmm. When the gods go to war, it isn't as if they're doing something wrong. If they kill somebody, if they do whatever, they can violate the laws as much as they want to because they instantiate it and they stand above it. But while we have to partake in it, the gods don't. And I think that's it's a very central feature within all pagan religions. I don't know if there's other ones that you can't come up with, but to me it seems like those four are one of the more central
that's
features.
pretty much it. They I don't know if you could say they anthropomorphize inanimate objects is another one.
Yeah, that's another one, yeah.
Like rocks have souls and
right,
like that kind
yeah.
of stuff. Like everything that exists has a soul. I can't think of another. I don't know if I can think of any more than that. But I mean, it's just stuff like that.
I'm sorry, just popped out of my mouth.
No, I know. I'm trying to think if there's anything, because I did a bunch of thinking about this earlier, but I kind of mind wiped and I didn't have any notes written down. But yeah, because pagan religions don't have to be polytheistic.
They don't have to be, yeah.
As long as their gods are in sumum, in nature.
Yeah,
it's and so when we say that pagan religions have character. I think the thing people have a hard time conceptualizing is that when, technically during the word came to use in like the 300s, which is when the church really started to was really quite popular and.
Yeah, at least started gaining. It was still illegal, but it was still gaining in popularity. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. It's once there were enough people to use a term like that, it's kind of when it started to. Or that's kind of when it was first widely used. It was referring, even when was Christianity legalized? When was it?
I think towards the end of the 200s, like 297 or something.
But so it was around that same time that Christianity would have been established as the
Yes, yeah.
as the what's the de facto religion of
It was after Constantine.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he's the one that legalized.
But I think people don't make the distinction that yes, it was referring to heretical religious systems.
Yes,
but it wasn't because they were heretical that they were referred to as pagan.
Right, yeah.
Pagan, they had character. Like there was a reason they were heretical.
Yes, yeah.
It's referring to those characteristics of it, not the heretical nature of the religious system itself.
Right,
and
yes.
I think that people don't separate those.
Yes, yeah.
Heathens kind of is different because heathen does... Well, heathen refers to more to people who haven't been exposed. Almost.
Yes,
there's a nature of like
there is, and that's why normally they use like for the African nations and some of the Eastern,
like the Eastern Asian stuff.
Yes,
like literally just hadn't.
Yeah,
no one had ever heard of it.
And so they call them heathens.
Yeah, but
pagans and
pagans
especially if you're talking about the early church, they really referred to Roman and Greek gods. I mean, specifically speaking, that is who they referred to.
Because that was still what was popular.
That was still what was popular, right?
In those districts.
Yes,
in Rome and stuff.
And so when many of like the heretical Christians began to adopt ideas of them, like iconoclasm. So iconoclasm is one of the very early church heresies. And this was the idea that icons, statues of Jesus, of Mary, of the saints was evil. And so there were basically began to destroy them and everything. And so a lot of these were rooted in many of heretical ideas that were deriving from paganism and everything. And so but I think the important thing is that at least if we could kind of comprehend that are features that every pagan religion in Europe shared with one another. Right, where these forming factors. And so my next question really was, then why is it that many people have a strong belief that Catholicism is more pagan than Protestantism or secularism?
Or that Catholicism is pagan at all.
That it's pagan at all, right?
Yes, what it's compared to. Like why? I don't remember exactly how I worded that.
Yeah.
But, man, I hate using this for that.
And again, this isn't as if it's defending one or the other. It's just that it's not an accurate depiction of what is happening.
But what do they mean when they say it's pagan?
Yes,
like I don't know what they mean.
I know, yeah, and so
that was something in Sexual Personae that Polly has said quite a lot. Is that Catholicism maintained more paganism, like maintained pagan aesthetics and stuff.
Yes,
like I don't know. Yeah, what that means? Like, what do you like?
Yeah, and I think what it means is just cosmetic. Is that Catholicism resembles paganism cosmetically more than
they literally
secularism.
Were concurrent. Like I don't.
Right, they were concurrent, but also it's like there's correlations as made. So like you were raised Protestant, right? And so most Protestants would say that Catholics are similar to pagans because they worship saints.
Well, they don't worship saints.
I know they don't, but this is what they claim, right?
Yes, so I've heard that many.
Yes,
times.
Yeah. And so there's this idea that the pagans had many gods and the church has many saints, and they pray to them and they do this, they do that. They have goddesses, and the Catholic Church has the Virgin Mary. They have sacrifices. They have a priest. Yeah. Many pagan religions have priests and priestesses. And so on and so forth.
They just say that because they don't know what they're talking about.
Right, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about. But I think that's in general what most people...
but I'm also saying they say that because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yes, but when most people who even are not Protestant believe and claim that Catholics share more with paganism, I think they're functioning within the same reality.
Of course, yeah.
Is that they're just looking at the cosmetic side of it. And so, you have the worship of God Dionysus, which is drunkards and partying, and then the Catholics had their festivals and they had their carnivals, which they also got drunk and all that shit. And so, in that way, that's really the only way that Catholicism shares in paganism. Really, is the cosmetics of it. Is that you see it, and I think a lot of it is simply related to how they converted people. And this is something that like a lot of very staunch conservative Catholics don't like about Pope Francis. And that's because Pope Francis is actually going back to how the church has always converted people, and so the church historically never went into a place. So like for example, this is an example, a real life example that I know from my family, and so my grandma was black and she had African heritage, and but she was raised in Peru, and so my mom always had the statue that she called Eloah. So Eloah had a horn, not a horn, but a spear through its head on double sides, and you're supposed to put it by the door, and it's supposed to offer protection or whatever, and then you do little prayers and stuff like that. And so this was actually from African descent, and then there was this this way that when the Catholics went to Africa, they looked at what kind of like heathenistic rituals they had. They looked at their gods, and then rather than saying you're evil, you're going to hell because you're worshiping these gods, is that they took these gods and then they related them to their saints. And so in Peru, there was San Martin. And so Eloah, the god Eloah, had many similarities with San Martin. And so when they try to convert you, they say, well, you know how you pray to Eloah for protection in your home? We have the same thing. We have Saint Martin, who you pray to so that he could pray to God so that you could protect your home. And this kind of triggered within them. So it's like, oh, okay. And so they kind of Christianize pagan gods. They Christianize pagan rituals.
They don't adopt them.
They don't adopt them, right? They kind of Christianize them, and they've done this. They've done this for as far as we know they existed. So when they converted a lot of the pagans in Rome and in Greece, they really did the same thing. It's like, you have your gods, you have your statues, you have your comprehension of the good, and so they related it to them. And so because of that, many of the aesthetics, if you will, at least the cosmetic aesthetics, not really like the beautiful itself, but the cosmetic aesthetics are more similar to paganism in Europe because of the way they converted people. And so I think because of that, many people view Catholicism and they look at it and they just think that, well, it's so close cosmetically that they must in some way hold many of their ideas the same.
And what I meant when I said they were concurrent is that the history, the history of aesthetic evolution in Europe between when what technically refers to paganism fell out of fashion and Protestants is 1,500 years.
Yes.
We'll say 1,000 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. It's just 1,000 years between the solidification of the Catholic Church and then the Protestant Church.
Yeah.
So, of course, Catholic aesthetics are going to be more similar to pagan aesthetics because it literally happened at the same time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, it's you can't... Like, of course, Catholics didn't build Seventh-day Adventist-looking churches.
Right, yes, yeah.
It's it just seems like a very silly argument to me to say that. It's like, it's not that Catholics maintained pagan aesthetics. It's that they maintained aesthetics of the same time period.
Yes, yeah.
As the pagans exist,
Yes, yeah. No, yeah, definitely. And then later on, they started to break away. Like when you go to the Gothic period, it's no longer harkening back to any of the paganism. That's kind of like their own aesthetic. But yeah, if you're talking about the really early church, between, from the turn of the century to AD. All the way up probably like to 500, 600.
500, 600.
Yeah, many of their aesthetics did resemble it. But again, that's because that's the way they converted them. And so there's literally...
It also was just beautiful.
Yes.
Also,
of course, right. That's another thing.
Good.
Yeah. And so there are even some churches in Greece where there's like stained glass windows of Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle with halos over them. And it was because
Aristotle's recognized.
Yes, and so they kind of Christianized them, saying like, they're not saints, but they were in some way prophetic in the region and the pagan reality that they were living in. And so they were gaining at some kind of truth. They were kind of inspired by truth in their investigation philosophically.
It would be silly to hold Thomas Aquinas as a saint and then reject Aristotle outright.
Right, exactly. Yes,
it wouldn't make any sense.
And And so, yeah, I think because of all those qualities, and most of it is just skin deep, it's just cosmetic, they just view them as being more pagan, while they just don't really comprehend the like fundamental distinctions, I think, that exist within Catholicism.
Pagan actually means.
Yes, what it actually means. That's what they don't. And so this is why many times, I think I texted to you for the first time, but I've said it many times, is that, Protestantism is more fundamentally closer to paganism, but without the fun.
Yeah.
It's like, without the debauchery, without the orgies, without the drunkenness. Without the beautiful architectures or the statues. It's like you basically remove all of the fun that was within paganism, all the beautiful things, and you strip it down to its core philosophical principles, and you get Protestantism. Right? And that's and that's what it is about. But I think that's probably towards the end of our argument. And so, so for example, rather than having metaphysical dualism, Catholicism had metaphysical hylomorphism. Yeah. So as they understand that reality is not two independent entities that exist in the world, but rather there's only one substance, the substance that we see. This is just one substance, but it's made up of parts, it's made up of form and matter. And the form and matter do not exist apart from one another. And the one thing that when I was writing these notes, I was thinking to myself, those who are not Catholics listening to this, or those who are just simply socially Catholic, which many times they hold Protestant views, are either going to walk away from this episode and think, wow, the Catholics are really crazy, or they might come out and think, wow, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
And so, when we think of like Christians and we think of heaven and hell, we most of the times, the general populace thinks of this state of being, or this place that you go after your body dies and you float off and you're like this invisible little soul that goes off and just worships God.
You get a new body, is what they say. But
yes, it's kind of what they say, but it's always within this way. But in Catholicism, it's the belief that your body would literally resurrect. Yeah. It isn't figurative speech. It isn't like, this is why for the duration of most of the church, it was immoral to cremate your body. Because when you bury it properly, they believe that body is going to resurrect. The same way that Jesus' body resurrected, your body will resurrect. It's more similar to call Catholicism like the idea of paradise, a bunch of zombies resurrecting from the grave. That is more an accurate depiction of Catholicism than this idea of a soul floating off into heaven and then living in that way. They believe so strong in hylomorphism that you cannot exist as a soul alone, that a human being is one substance, and it is made of body and soul. So when you die, you inherit a new body, but the new body is a resurrected body. Yeah. And the resurrected body is to be in paradise. And so heaven is not only a like spiritual realm, heaven is also a corporeal realm. Yeah. It's that you will live with a body, and you will live with a glorified body. And meaning
that it's perfect.
Meaning that it's perfect, right? That you're no longer going to be, incumbents with your vices, with your sin or whatever. You're going to be as Christ was, who was lived perfect, fully man, and will also be fully realized. That is the Catholic belief, right? And so it's not this idea that like the pagans had that your soul is separated from your body and dragged into Hades, and in Hades you suffer or like the Norsemen call it hell. That's actually where we get the term hell. And so that you go into hell, or you go into the underworld of the Romans, and that's where you exist as a soul for eternity. That's not the idea within Catholicism. The idea in Catholicism is that Jesus rose from the dead, and through the sacrament of baptism, through the other sacraments in which you receive, that you gained eternal life, and that you too will literally resurrect from the grave, and that you will be in paradise at that point. And so this is just a stark difference from paganism. Paganism does not at all hold that idea. They don't hold hylomorphism as real, except for Aristotle. So Aristotle was a pagan that held that idea, but pagans in general didn't, right? That's not really something that
That's why it was unique.
Yes,
That's why it was
yeah,
new.
yes, it was unique for Aristotle in that position. But pagans just didn't. Now, Socrates didn't, Plato didn't, none of these people did. Aristophanes didn't. It doesn't matter which prophet or pagan priest you bring, they don't hold that position. So that's the main thing. The other one, we talked about at length in a podcast, so it's probably not too important to talk about it here, but, is the idea of ipsum esse subsistence. The idea that God is being itself, is the act of to be. That there is no entity that is bigger than us that exists in the world.
That is God.
That is God. It is that reality is fundamentally an act. And this act of to be is what we identify as God. And so this eliminates any source of God. This eliminates any kind of, living on Mount Olympus or living on some other structure in which the pagan gods or the pagan religions said the gods lived in. It's like they don't. God is being, and so we're all entangled in this idea of reality. And so, there's, the ens summum God is fundamentally pagan, while ipsum esse subsistence is what made Christianity, Catholicism, so unique in the Western world. Is because they rejected this idea. There is no Zeus. There is no individual thing in which we call God. Rather, there is Deus. There is Theos. There is this idea of...
Which is annoying because English, the word God, actually refers to
it does, right.
Summum.
It does,
God.
yeah. I don't know if you have more to say about that, but...
No.
No, yeah.
Well, just anecdotally. This is definitely a topic where I kind of walked in here. I was like, okay, Jeremy, you have this on lock. I'm just gonna let you hammer it out, and I'm gonna nod because I know and agree with all of it.
Yes,
you're gonna hammer it better. But the idea of ipsum esse subsistence was literally what convinced me that Catholics are right about everything.
Yeah.
Was the idea of God as the act of being and not as a
individual,
a big guy.
Yeah.
That God is the actualizer. Is it that? What is it? The moving mover. The
unmoved mover.
Unmoved mover.
The unactualized actualizer.
Yes, that.
Or Aquinas says a perfect name for God is quiesced. That is like that. That is the name of.
Yeah, it's so. It is the being. It's not the being. It is being that so completely. You can't say pre-exists because it's not existing, but that it's so basic in its reality that it's almost impossible to articulate in speech.
Yes, yeah.
Because anything you say partakes of it and doesn't describe it well enough. Unless you're speaking Latin.
Yes,
that's where they
exactly.
came up with all this.
Yeah, Latin or Greek. But I think one quality is that there is no substance there, right? That metaphysically, what's unique about it is that it fundamentally says that reality itself is not substantial. That reality itself is action, and having this difference, formulated much of the Western idea of just what it means to be at all, right? Because once Christianity came into play, it was that it's no longer that paganistic view that you have two substances, spiritual substance and physical substance, or material and immaterial substance. Rather, fundamentally, you could break reality down to an act, and that any particular material thing only exists as insofar that it partakes in activity. And partakes in actualization. So many of the sciences within physics and everything began to develop because of this idea, right? And I think we and this probably is going to piss some people off, but I part of my doctoral thesis that I proposed and everything that I was writing for my advisor was specifically that there's a regression in thought now, because we no longer have the idea that fundamentally everything is an act. We kind of went back towards this understanding that it has to be a substance, right? Whether someone looking for the boson particle, whether it is somebody who has a quantum physics as their fundamental principle, that is like displacements of electrons as here, there, and nowhere and everywhere at the same time.
We're literally rehashing.
We're rehashing paganistic ideas. Yes.
So this is an interesting question. That might be kind of a or something I should say that makes it difficult for people to conceive of the pure act of being.
Yeah.
Is that it is impossible to imagine anything that does not partake of formal reality.
Yes. Yeah.
I really don't think people correctly. So we as a culture, we've essentially rejected the concept of formal reality at all.
Yes.
Which is why if there is no formal if there is no form of man that pre-exists, I really don't like English, that pre-exists.
Yeah.
Being a Spanish speaker and understanding Latin, it's very hard to say sentences comfortably. You're like, the form that precedes. That's good. Precedes. That precede, like this wine glass partakes of the form of wine glass.
Yes.
To be a wine glass, it must partake of the form of wine glass.
Yes. Yeah.
So the form of wine glass precedes
the actual
thing, and it is that form of wine glass that we utilize to distinguish what a wine glass is from this glass, because this obviously isn't a wine glass, and then the formal realities or the forms of the two different glasses are different, and these two partake of those, and then there's glass, and then there's vessel, and then there's and it's if you reject that idea, then really there is nothing that anything can be whatever.
Exactly.
So like a man isn't a man if formal reality isn't real.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yes.
I think is the problem. The rejection of formal reality.
Yeah, it is. Yes. No, 100% is that once you reject hylomorphism, and you adopt again dualism, and then once you reject the act of being, and then you adopt either materialism that we kind of
because the act of being is form.
Yes, exactly.
It's form per se.
Yes. Yeah. And so you begin to reject everything, and this is why there's a closer link. And hopefully, by the end of the podcast, the listeners and viewers, can see it, that there's more of a link within paganism, Protestantism, and atheistic secularism, is that those ideas are actually more closer linked because each one of them, all of them, reject this idea of formal reality. They reject the idea of pure act. They reject the idea of hylomorphism. But it is these principles that made Catholicism so unique. Besides,
and still does,
right? Yeah. Besides also that it was not a religion formed from a book. But hopefully we can get into that.
Came way later.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and so again, that cannot be stressed enough. We could probably sometime make an entire episode just on that
formal reality.
Yes, on formal reality of pure act or whatever. But hopefully the listeners can at least comprehend that is different than saying Zeus. That is different than saying Apollo, Dionysus.
Because
or
so here, let me offer a counter argument. So if we are to say that one of the you can't even say features of God, I guess nature. One of the part of the nature of God is that God is form.
Yes,
is power, is knowledge. It's not that God is all knowing. It's not that,
exactly
the idea that it doesn't. It's an incoherent view in Protestant theology that God hears everything you say.
Yes.
And it doesn't, because if he hears things, there must be things he doesn't hear.
Right, yes.
Because, like, if for God to know something, it implies that God can learn something. Because to know something, or just knowing something requires belief. And, like, God obviously doesn't believe because there's nothing for God to believe. There's
Yes.
And that doesn't necessarily make sense to people who don't know
what
we're talking about. It's so far.
Yeah, and so I mean, maybe this needs a little further explanation. So it isn't the case that God knows everything, but it is the case that God is knowledge.
Yeah.
Right. So when we
Because you partake of knowledge when you know something.
Yes, exactly. And so when we know something, it's only because we have an intellect that is partaken in being. And so to know something is to know God, right? It isn't that God is all powerful in the sense that God has stronger power than we are, but God is power itself.
And that's why these things are, because that's for God to be the act of being, he cannot partake of any formal reality at all.
Exactly, yes.
Because for a God to be a big guy, that means he's big, which means he's not small, which means he's partaking of bigness.
Yes, yeah.
He's a guy, so maybe he's partaking of manness or of masculinity or whatever.
Yeah.
He can't be partaking of power.
Right, yes.
He can't be, like, he can't really be everywhere at once, because even that, like, that's
still something
there.
Yes.
He's still present.
Yes,
which means that he has. That's the other thing, is that it imparts spatial reality to God.
Yes, right, yeah.
It's
yeah, but and Catholicism was the rejection of all of that. It was like, no, God is being, right? And as God, no, I shouldn't say even it is being. God is the act of being, right? Even things to even be at all partakes in the act. And so
that's why I keep saying, okay, he's not a being.
Yes, he's not a being. Yes.
No.
And so this was just again, it is if not the most like important distinction that one needs to make with Catholicism against paganism, is that no, Catholicism does not hold God as a version of us, but just bigger. Rather, Catholicism holds that God is what allows anything to be. And
I think a way you could say that is, it's not that God is an infinitely bigger God, or an infinitely more, because they'll be like, oh, like
Descartes claims.
Yeah, like that, because that's something that it's God is so big you can't even conceive of it. God knows so much, because that's the way that they bridge the incoherence, is that it's incoherent.
Yes,
because the thing about, I'm trying to kind of weave this together. I've been really out of it today, but one of the ways that they try to solve the problem of God's bigness, or whatever, if we want to call it the problem of God's,
talking about like the process,
the big,
stuff.
The way that they try to, instead of, I have one side of this, and I'm trying to form the other side of it. We can move on, because I'm really not saying anything.
No, I don't think we should. I think this is
no, I understand, but I'm really floundering on like what I'm trying to say.
I actually don't think you are, yeah.
Am I not?
No.
Okay, I feel like I am. I
think you're clarifying some of the jargon that I'm using.
No, yes, I'm trying to bridge it for people who grew up in Protestant churches, that like a lot of what you'll say is like,
or even atheists that just know Christianity through Protestantism.
Yes, they just call Christianity,
right? Yeah,
is what they just refer to Protestantism when they say Christianity. The marriage was invented in the 1700s or something. Any of that. But so something they'll say is that it's like God has an infinite capacity for these things. God is infinitely big.
Yes.
God is infinitely knowledgeable. Because that's when you say it's all knowing, it's like, no, he knows so much. He's God, so he knows so much you couldn't ever even have any idea about how much he knows. Or like, he is so powerful that to
be in his presence, you're just going to disappear.
Yeah, you'll just burn up. Like it's like a nuclear bomb. You're at ground zero of Nagasaki when you see God. And you are just dust in a second.
Yeah.
Because I think that's actually something is like, if you were to see God, you would burn up.
Right, I know.
Which is so drippingly pagan that it's hard for me to even believe it. But it's not that God, because that's the thing that something about that. One of the features of that kind of language and that kind of thinking is that really convinces people that they can't ever know what God is.
Yes, it does.
Where Catholics are like, oh yeah, I know exactly what God is.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the
or at least they would
learned
know.
ones.
Yes,
Yeah.
or at least they would know what God is not.
Yeah, they're like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
you can know that.
Yeah,
That's
yes,
the beautiful. That's the beautiful thing about Catholics, and I guess not necessarily just Catholics, but like Aquinas and Augustine. There's like, you can like kind of know everything.
Yes, yeah.
You do have a capacity to know everything.
Yes, yes.
Which is beautiful. Because I think people know like everything is knowable.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's this.
It's your imperfection as a human being that keeps you from doing it. But like, if you were perfect, absolutely, you could know everything.
Yes, because within Catholicism, it was viewed that your intellect is actually a gift from God, and so I don't remember. You probably know the verse. Maybe you do. I know.
Maybe
your mom. Your mom would. And so like there's this verse in the Bible that talks about how the wisdom of man is inferior to whatever of God. I'm really butchering this, so hopefully a Protestant.
You would have been so proud of me. I was on Trans Regret Snoopy Presents the Bible on Saturday or Tuesday.
Tobit.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I read the thing 3 times, and I'm like, I can't quote this exactly, and I don't remember where it is. But there's this, like it's 14 chapters, and it's like 10 pages long. Like I don't know where this thing is. But I remember they said this thing.
You sound like a Catholic there.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need to know where it is.
But yeah, so there's this verse that many Protestants always used against me when they spoke to me.
Against me.
Yeah, like anybody that was a philosopher, and they normally use it to denigrate philosophical thinking. Yeah. While in Catholicism, it was viewed that your intellect was actually a gift, and it was a means for you to come to know God.
Well, so let me unpack that, because that's something that I get in arguments with this about people with increasing frequency. Yeah. And I hear about it from an increasing number of people. Mm-hmm. At least more and more people are convinced of it, or I'm just discovering that people think this more than I thought they did, because it just doesn't reflect my experience at all in life, is that philosophical thought is bad. Mm-hmm. Is that philosophy is bad and not worthwhile. Mm-hmm. Or that like if you think too much about philosophy, you're a nerd and wasting your time. It's just like, actually, one of the features of man is intellect. Mm-hmm. And if a feature of man is something, if there's a positive feature of man, it is your job to do that thing as much as possible.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Like, and this is what's funny, and we got more to it in the end, but that this is also a feature that very heavy secular atheists hold, and Protestants hold, and pagans hold. And like all 3 of those have so much similarities that it's unbelievable.
And this is something I think that you and I actually agree about like art and stuff. Like you and I are both completely of the mind that you can objectively analyze the quality of art.
Of course,
it's stupid to say that you can't do that.
Yes, yeah.
Like, you can't really objectively. It's like, no, if it exists, you can analyze its quality.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
In regards to its being, because if like this bottle is a bottle, which means it partakes of the form of the bottle, okay, how well does it do that?
Yes, yeah.
That's objective analysis. That's art. Okay, what's art? How well is it art?
Exactly.
Like, you can analyze it.
Yeah, you could analyze art.
It's
objectively.
It's absurd to me that there are categories of things that refer to nothing that you just can't analyze.
Yeah,
but anyway, what was I saying before that? What were we talking about?
Oh, how they
philosophy or like
that they both despise it.
So what's the argument that the intellect isn't a gift from God?
So normally it's just through Bible verses that they say, but they believe that once you begin to do that,
you'll become God.
One time I had like a Protestant call me like a doubting Thomas. I had another Protestant.
That's a weird little baby.
It is, yeah. It's like another Protestant again. Just quote that one verse. I probably should look it up, but it's this quote that they all just kind of bring up. The other thing is
it says philosophers and astrologers in the same sentence or something.
Does it? Yeah.
There's one where it like condemns philosophers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can't imagine that's not weird translation games.
Right. Yeah.
So when they say homosexual.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other one is, I guess just overall that these things are not supposed to be thought of. You're supposed to have faith, and that's what they normally go back to. They go back to like that the sola fide idea that you just must have faith
alone.
Yeah, faith alone. That you need faith in order for you to be saved.
Is that the Martin Luther thing?
Mm-hmm, right. Yeah.
What is it?
Sola fide,
Scripture alone.
Yeah, Scripture alone and faith alone.
Those are the only two?
Only two for salvation.
But those are not alone.
Yes.
Those are two things. What do you mean alone?
I know. Yes. Yeah, I know.
Those aren't alone.
He wasn't rational. I don't think he was intended to be.
This is an interesting thing. Like faith alone. And
I know.
Which one is it?
It literally doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense because he wasn't behaving within a realm of reason.
Because faith and Scripture together are actually better than...
It's like trying to rationalize Nietzsche. It's like, no, you're doing it wrong. If you try to rationalize Luther...
The same lineage.
Yes, the same lineage. Yeah. It's like, just don't, you know.
But that's something... Sorry, I keep going back to this. And I think it's interesting, worthwhile to discuss, but like, why... So it's the same kind of thing where like people are unwilling or either incapable of or unwilling to separate the fact that pagan religion was heretical, heterodox, whatever you want to say, at a certain point, and the features that it actually referred to.
Yes, yeah.
Like that's because that's almost a rejection of formal reality in a way. Like there's nothing. It's just the only reason you can call something pagan is relative to the established religion.
Right.
That's
exactly.
the only.
Yeah.
That's the only feature of it. If you call something pagan, that's or that's not necessarily the only, but the fundamental feature of
which many like
pagan
historicists like Polly and stuff do really in the end.
Because that's how they understand. They just operate in
because they reject formal reality.
Yes.
And so there's only contingent reality.
When people say that philosophy is bad, I'm like, okay, which teacher didn't you like? Which thinker did you read and think was dumb? Like, why do you think?
Yeah.
Like part of the nature of man is to philosophize, which means to seek truth. Like
because if all they really know is philosophy of the last 500 years, I'd be like, I agree with you.
Even 100 is worse.
Like, it's worse. Like,
the shorter and shorter you get, the worse
it is. Yeah.
Like
if the first introduction was Wittgenstein, and they'd be like, "This is what I know about philosophy," I'll be like, "Yeah, that's kind of bullshit."
If somebody told you to read like Being in Time,
just Being in Time, right?
Kind of bullshit.
Or Foucault,
must be dumb.
Right? Yes, it's like, really, this is what you guys waste your time on. That's exactly what I say.
And that's the other. That's actually this kind of leads into another thing that I tell people is I don't read that much. I read things that are circumstantially interesting or that I read for this or like I've read for classes at a university or in high school or whatever. Like I have read. Yeah. I don't sit around reading all the time.
Exactly.
Like, oh, you must be well read. It's like, no, you just think. Like you can just
think. Yes,
like, you don't have to read stuff.
Yes.
Which is actually one of the hallmarks of the show is that reading sucks, but
and it does so much.
That's one of our signature things. That I've actually gotten some pissed off stuff about that. But like, they're like, what do you mean reading's bad? Like, what should I read? I'm like, I don't know. I just say read Aristotle. I'm like, just read Aristotle.
Yeah.
And then know that Catholics did it better later. And just that's all
then just read Aquinas.
Yes. When they're like, have a good time. I'm gonna read some they're like reading all these novels from the 20th century. They're gonna read Heidegger and they're gonna read like Foucault and stuff. And they're like, oh, I just want to contrast everything.
Yeah, and they've really been in dark. Like, this is going to be on a little tangent, but I do want to go back to it.
No, we can do tangents.
Yes, but
tangents are good.
The thing is that we've all been indoctrinated in this idea that reading for the sake of itself is inherently good, right? That there's something good that your eyeball is looking at these shapes.
Well, it's like
we correlate with like words.
Yeah.
And that activity alone, right? It doesn't. You hear many teachers say it, right? It's like, doesn't matter if you're reading it is good. It's like, why?
Well, I mean, technically it's good, but like it's just it doesn't. It's not.
I mean, insofar that it exists, I would agree with you. Yes, yeah. In that way, it is good, but if what you're reading is bullshit, it's like you're actually
So here's a good analogy.
detrimental to your
Let me
existence.
try to make an analogy. So
Yeah.
let's say, agriculture is good.
Okay. Yes.
Farming things.
Yes.
Just
In general,
the act of it.
The act of it.
So I'm going to
for
go to
a
the
particular
Sahara
being.
Desert and I'm going to plant a garden in the sand.
Yes. Yeah.
And the act of cultivating
Yeah.
or attempting to itself is good.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the fruits of it are.
Right. Yes. Yes.
It's good to do that.
Yes.
So you're going to spend your entire life in the desert
Yeah.
trying to grow watermelons in sand.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's not necessary. You don't need the watermelons to grow.
just the act.
It's just
alone.
the act of farming
Yes.
is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the exercising the muscles of.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like you'll sustain your life somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
doing it and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how people take reading. It's like, no, that's stupid.
I mean, there is kind of a weird street cred it gives you because it's so.
Yeah.
It's like listening to vinyl records or something. It's
Right.
just like,
Yes. It's like,
There's
oh,
something.
I'm
There is
so
something.
well
There
read.
is something about it that I mean, it's an archaic like vinyl records are an archaic medium, and listening to them is meditative because it
Yeah.
requires more of your attention, requires more equipment, requires more space. And is
Yes,
so expensive that you can only justify it by only listening to music when you do it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And like reading books is kind of it's the barrier or the what is it? The barrier of entry. I don't remember what this is. The bar. The bar is much lower for reading, but there's something about it that's like artistically archaic in a way that like
It is,
makes
yeah.
It's appealing aesthetically because it's not anything we do now, and
Right,
everyone
yeah.
hates being on their phones all the time. So when you see someone, you're really
Yeah.
like, okay, it's like comforting in a way to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something about the way that like just appearing as if you're reading makes you look more human than
Yes,
the
yeah.
people around. It's
No, I just.
but those are all like just
I just-
cosmetic. I
yes.
don't think it's
But I even just remember like elementary school. It was literally the thing that they tried to indoctrinate me in all the time. It was like this idea that just reading for the sake of reading is good. And that it doesn't matter what you're reading.
the posters like reading.
Yes, it's just reading, right? And then
Which
you
is
have
very
that-
lazy on their
you
part.
have, like,
'Cause then
that-
they don't
like-
actually.
Yeah.
It doesn't require anyone to teach you.
It doesn't, yes.
What the reading
Yeah.
means.
And then this, I think when we did like our poly episode, there was some comments about it too. It was just like, well, just read it. It's like, no, I'm not
Just read
like,
it.
yeah,
It's
what do you
slog.
mean? Yes, you just read
Do you
it.
know how? So that was actually
Yeah.
for the listener, just so the listener knows, our sexual personae episode was the most downloaded
Yeah.
episode without a guest by a lot.
Yes.
It did very well.
Yeah.
Based some on the internet drama
But-
surrounding the time it came out,
Right,
but
right,
also
yeah.
but also just the fact that that's something people were interested in, and the quantity of people that DM'd me privately and like, oh my god, thank God I tried. Thank you for somebody to talk about it objectively because I tried to read it
Yes,
and I got through the
yeah.
first 2 chapters like
Yeah.
20 times, and I was like, I know. This is what we said. The number of people that told me that way outnumbered anybody that was upset about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
By a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
I get DMs about a lot of the episodes and stuff,
Yeah.
but like this was, I was hearing from people I'd never talked to privately about this. And
Nice,
they were like, oh my God, thank God.
Yeah.
Somebody's saying that like it doesn't say anything. And people get through the first chapter and they're like, okay. And then they get into the second, they're like, this doesn't.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. Of course, everybody's saying it privately.
I know. Yeah.
Like like there's it has a certain status that you don't necessarily want to assail.
Yes. Yeah.
In,
certain social spheres and stuff. Yeah.
the one to which we were adjacent and stuff. And I think it was a little bit of a bold move to come out with that kind of a thing, but I didn't think it was going to be, but I guess it was.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that said that was,
Yes.
I was surprised. I
Yes,
was like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We the amount of people that loved it way outnumbered
Yes, yeah.
because they're upset.
If you're going to read something, the goodness comes about what you're getting from it, the information that you're getting from it. And if the only means to get that information is physically reading it, great. But if there's other means to get it, it doesn't fucking matter.
I know.
If somebody can read it to you, if you go into bed and be like, hey, I'm so rich that I have this motherfucker to read me this book every night at bedtime, maybe read about 20, 30 pages, and I will get the information in the end, good. If you have audiobooks that we got on our phone and you could listen to it, good. Because the objective ontological goodness is not simply in the act of reading, but it is in the information in which you are partaking. And your ability to understand that information, dissect it, see whether it is worthwhile to listen to this or to read it or to speak of it. And then formulate argumentations or everything. That's where all the goodness you begin to partake. But just looking at, like, if I'm reading my notes, right? What is it that I'm looking at? I'm looking at fucking ink. No, not ink, toner, right? From a toner printer in these certain shapes in which I was trained to look at and relate to words in which I have learned. And
that refer to reality.
That refer to reality.
Yeah.
That's all that I'm doing. All right. And so insofar that it exists, is it partaken in being in good? Fine. Yes. But if somebody can partake in the information in a different way,
better.
That is better.
Requires less labor.
Yes. That requires less labor. Does that make it worse?
So this is something interesting. This is
Yeah.
So where did we begin? We began with very basic language
Yeah.
that referred to immediate surroundings.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is I don't know how much of this is even true.
Yeah.
You can imagine the evolution of language would be such that you start with
Even just take a baby, for
so
example.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I'm talking about documented language. So you have language that develops into something much more sophisticated in its ability to refer to the abstract, and by referring to the abstract, referring to the abstract is literally what philosophers do. It's
Right,
it's
Both the concrete and abstract.
yeah. But I mean, there's something that's an interesting note when you're learning a foreign language. You know you're proficient when you can bump into the abstract.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because now you no longer have to refer to the things around you.
Yes.
Once you can start discussing what those things mean and their relation to each other, that's when you're fluent.
Yes. Yeah.
Or like politics or economics or whatever.
Yeah.
But so you have like what what's the I'm trying to think I can't believe I can't think the Mesopotamian like tablet things.
Hieroglyphic? No,
they're like
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, there's hieroglyphics. That's like a certain system that came out. The Egyptians used it, the Mayans used it, whatever. You have the clay tablets. Those were really inefficient, and the writing system is really convoluted. And that evolved to writing with reeds or different kinds of nibs, which then they have pens, and now there's parchment and paper, and papyrus or whatever, and now they're using like ink made from certain materials in different utensils for writing. They would make up different tools, and then that became more and more and more sophisticated, more and more what's the word? It became more and more efficient, reproducible. The writing systems simplified themselves to not be images of words, but that you could use letters to represent sounds, like the whole thing. And then they invent the printing press, which I just jumped a huge amount of history, but like, the printing press, and then
like scribers and stuff.
Scribes and whatever. You invent the printing press, and then for some reason, once we invent the printing, which really that thing on that paper you printed is just a more efficiently printed piece from a printing press. It's the same, like the Gutenberg Bible isn't that. It's just the way that was printed is better, toner and the toner is more water resistant and
Wi-Fi
stuff.
signal, whatever.
It's just I don't know why at that point point, the efficiency and totality of the maintenance and articulation of information, and like why that's the end.
Yes.
Like why is reading the, because what you're doing in that is you're trying to, what written language does is it communicates that which someone would say to you that's not here.
Yeah.
So when someone on your phone, you can download anything you want and someone can say that to you. I don't know why that's lesser. That's what that was. It was a placeholder for people saying things to you.
Because it was like we forgot why reading became important.
Yeah.
Reading didn't become important because of its own sake, but it was because of the information that can be
so now you can write something and someone 4,000 miles away can read it, and you don't have to go there.
But now what we could do is that we could have fucking audiobooks. And so if somebody 4,000 miles away, 10,000 miles, it doesn't matter, can listen to what somebody has to say.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's even more engaging.
Yeah.
Like if I were an extremely rich man, I really would hire somebody to read things to me.
Yeah.
It would be beautiful.
Oh, beautiful.
Like I'll be like, tuck my into bed and be like, read to me, please. Read to me.
I'm going to hire
Marcus from
UK,
please.
I'll hire to read me things.
Yes, with a beautiful accent.
Yeah.
And, that's amazing. I would love that. Why? Because I could then begin to one of the funny things about me, I remember one time, Amanda and I went to the same, both undergrad and grad school. Yeah. But there was this one professor, Dr. Davies.
You went to Leuven? Badass, Amanda.
And so
do you have a degree from Leuven?
No, I'm 3 months away.
But and so in undergrad there was this professor, Dr. Davies, who was kind of well known because he actually appeared on
Dr. Davies.
Yeah. And so he was like he was television famous. Mm-hmm. Like he would in many documentaries. Like he was one of the people that I think helped translate much of the Gospel of Thomas that was discovered later on.
That's not. Is that what? So
yeah.
Sorry. Finish your story and then I'll.
Okay. Yeah. But anyways, So in his class, like I found him to be a very engaging lecturer. This is one of the first time I discovered the way that I learn, right? And so people who watch this rather than listen can see it, but this was literally my position in every class. I'd be like this. I just stare. I just stared, right?
Yeah.
That was So even in grad school, that's the way I did. Like so I was in Leuven, and I would sit there, and I would just, I would sit like one chair behind so I could have a footrest, and so I would just come in there early. I would just put my rest, and I would just stare. Like I wouldn't take notes. I would just look.
I hate taking notes.
Me too, because I learn better by auditory. Like like when somebody speaks and they're engaged, I could learn better by hearing what you have to say, because when I read, the issue with me reading is that there's a mediation in which I have to engage in before I get into the information. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason why in high school they were trying to really push these what were they called? They were like these books that has the dates and you write. What are those? Planners. Yeah.
I hated that.
Yes, me too. And they try to push it on. They'll get you free planners to be like, write it. You know why it never worked with me?
Why?
Because it was an added thing for me to remember. I not only that's why. Yes.
Like when they're
it's like you're making it harder for me because I have to remember to take it with me all the time. Then I have to remember to write it down.
Why are you grading me on having a plan?
Yes. And then I have to remember to open it up to look. And I'm like, you've given me 4 extra things to remember. Right?
It turns... in the same way they do with reading, the planner thing is a good example.
Yeah.
That they make a virtue out of the
way that you
do.
Yeah, rather than what is being done. Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's literally a reflection of like the conversation I had with my mom where she, work is the virtue.
Yes, right.
It's like, no.
No, the end product is the virtue.
The product of your work is the virtue.
Yes.
What you do with the planner, if you need one, I'm not saying people can't use planners.
Exactly, yeah.
If you were, there are people who are busy enough that have to write everything down.
Yes, yeah. And for some people, it might help them. Fine. I really don't
That's
care.
totally fine.
It is,
if you
yeah.
like reading, that's
fine. Yeah, that's
fine.
you. You're weird,
Do
but yeah,
not
it's fine.
pretend like I can't. Don't pretend like I can't listen to someone read me sexual persona and not know what happened.
Yes, yeah.
Like somehow reading, I'm gonna be like filled with the spirit and like
Yeah,
shake.
no. In fact,
like-
having me read it, it will be me like, it's like you're making it worse for me because I cannot now
I should.
like
have
I
you seen
can't
a
begin
physical
to think
copy of
about
it?
it. No,
I'll bring it in and you'll panic.
Yes,
It's this thick.
exactly.
And the
Yes,
font's like 9.
yes. It will be harder for me to begin to comprehend because I'm so inundated by the entire process of looking at toner on fucking like dead wood rather than just like I just want to absorb the information. That's what I want. I want to know what this person had to say. And a better way for me, not everybody,
listen to
but for me, it's just to listen to
both
it.
of us, yeah.
Yes. If somebody could read it to me,
You know
great.
who didn't care?
Who?
The anarchists didn't care.
Yeah, yeah.
Anatomy of the State. No one made a comment on.
Yes,
on the
yeah.
fact that we read
It's
this
because-
in the audiobook.
It was great. For that one, I
The
did
greatest
both.
rejectors of formal reality on the
Exactly,
planet Earth.
yeah.
But still.
The only time that reading for me is good is for cut and paste. And so, like, I could find the argument and I could, like, highlight it and then cut
well,
and
and
paste
it's
it.
the
But that's just for typing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, when you print that off, the power could go out and you still have that. I understand.
Exactly, yeah.
There's still benefits to written language.
Right,
I'm
exactly,
obsessed with like calligraphy and stuff because there's a beauty.
There's
in it.
beauty to it, right? Yes, yeah.
But
And it isn't that I would destroy it. It is good to have that. But that's like, if you have other means to get that same information, go that way first.
if your goal is to
If your goal is to
learn,
yes, yeah, go any other way first. But if the best way for you is to look at toner on paper, fine. But if the best way for you to is have a lovely British accent reading to you, even better. You know, there's so many ways that you could get the information that to say that there's only virtue in reading is retarded. it's just so stupid.
well, it's just very backwards because
It
just
is,
like
yes.
we've been reading.
We have better technology now. I mean, ebooks,
Finally, how
yes.
for how many hundreds of
I
years
know.
was it just reading?
Ebooks is such a gift. Like, it's oh my gosh! It's like you're telling me that I don't have to look at toner on paper or ink on paper or whatever, but somebody could actually relate this information auditorily, so I could be that dickhead in a classroom with my feet on the desk again. But now, like, listen to a book, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I love it. You know, I could retain the information so much better, and but looking at reading itself as a virtue, it's people have to recognize you were indoctrinated. Period. I mean, you were so you drank the Kool-Aid because you had a fat librarian who was just too chirpy to talk to you about whatever book of du jour was at that time. I think in my generation was that stupid.
What do you think
Spider,
of,
Charlotte's
what do you think
Web.
Of those like book reports they make?
Oh my gosh, it was retarded. Why? Honestly.
I want to tell you what happened in this book.
Yes. So I have to read it and then retell you the information that was in this thing. Fuck you.
The only time I don't have necessarily as negative a memory of it, but I was also learning Spanish fluently with no other outlet.
Yeah.
So like it was like an exercise in practicing.
Yeah,
you do
of course.
tons of book reports in Spanish, but then you just correct your grammar and stuff. It's just a language exercise, which is different.
which makes more sense.
Yes.
Yes. But it's like, why are you making me read the fucking Lorax? It's like, and then tell you back what it says. It's like I have to tell you back the stupid
They have
book.
movies.
Yes, Charlotte's Web. It's like, why did they push Charlotte's Web in the 80s when it was like that was just so weird. It was like everything. They decorated the classroom Charlotte's Web. They made us read the book Charlotte's Web. They made us watch the fucking cartoon. It's like,
so weird.
Why? Okay. It's a stupid little spider. It's a dumb story.
Now, maybe if they had extrapolated from it what it meant, maybe you have fonder memories.
Something, exactly. But it's like you have to know the details of it. Like when you take the fucking SATs and they make you do those, I don't know if they still make you do it, but they make you read like a paragraph of a certain narrative. and then they ask you specifics of the narrative. It's like, I don't care. Like, what I get out of narratives is the meaning.
Did you take the SAT?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you got?
Yeah.
Is it bad?
Oh, yeah. I fell asleep.
Oh my god! So you know they grade the ACT out of a 36, right?
Yes.
So I got a
yeah.
32.
Did you? Wow.
But my science score was a 17. So that tells you, was
Yeah.
it 30? 19? I got a ridiculously bad score in science.
The only reason why I got any decent score in my SAT was because of the math section. The language arts one, like I fell asleep. They made you read so much. I was like, and like I told you, the way that I read, I'm like, oh. And then it makes me tired, you know. And so I went like this for a second, and then I woke up. I was like, oh fuck! It's like, oh, it's over. It's like I went answer like 3 questions. Like, oh fuck! Yeah, it was bad. Yeah, I don't.
Because I also don't want people to think that like some of the greatest pieces of art I've ever experienced have been through reading. Like there's like like that To Live that we covered. Like, it's my favorite thing on earth, and I read that, and that's fine.
Yes, but it wasn't the act of reading that was glorious. It was the narrative.
Yes,
it was like the narrative itself is what's beautiful.
Yeah,
and so if you partook it in reading, fine. If you partook it in audiobook,
I became
fine.
emotional at different points during the audiobook, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. And so there's different ways that it affects you, and I get that. Like for example, if I need to dissect an argument, having the written material was easier for me because I could copy and paste. But if you give me like a physical one, that doesn't help me much more than an audiobook. Mm-hmm. The thing about like an electronic book is the fact that, you know, it's okay, this is what he literally says. I thought I could copy, I could paste, I could analyze it a little more closely. I could begin to like then put it in its reduced terms or whatever.
Well, it's just you can prioritize different things.
Yes, like you can. Yes,
you want to be able to quote it.
Yes.
Better.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe read it.
Yes.
But if you want to understand it,
the concepts of it, listening to for me is much more. Much more helpful, but just because I'm not a note taker. Every class I've done, it made some professors very uncomfortable because that's the way I would look at them every day. So I would stare at them, and they would like always look in the corner of their eyes, like, okay. It's like I'm not writing. It's like, I don't need to write because you know what writing does for me. Yeah. It's an added step that distracts me from the information.
Well, that's the thing. So that's the thing. We've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Oh, I need new frames. Do you see these little lines right here?
Yeah.
Because the frames are slightly too small.
Oh, yeah.
I love them, though. But they're Italian.
Oh.
Something, when I start to take notes in anything, I'll write a word, and I'm like, ooh, that looks really good. And then I'll write it again, and then I'll write it again, and I'll write it again. I'm like, wow.
Yes,
that's beautiful.
Yeah. Or I start drawing.
And then I'll start like, what's a word I could write like that?
Yes.
Because you've seen my handwriting. That's all I care about is my my handwriting. I love like my calligraphy, my Gothic calligraphy is like, I don't know if I've ever sent any of it to you.
Yeah.
Have I?
No, I don't think so, yeah.
1 second. My Gothic calligraphy is like...
Yeah.
I think it's like kind of stunning, but like I was writing people's names.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that is.
And it's not that I obsess over what I'm writing. It's that I obsess over the aesthetics of the word.
Yes.
Because then I make a little bit of an icon out of the, which is kind of, I think, more appropriate. It's more, that's why I like the quote unquote Mohammedan art where they literally just make a beautiful thing out of a word.
Yeah.
I'm like, I understand that.
Yes. Yeah.
I really think that the Arabic, I don't remember exactly what the term is. The Arabic alphabet is one of the most beautiful things.
It is. Yes.
I think that's also why their cultures are so inefficient, because it's such a ridiculous thing to write.
Yes. Yeah.
Just efficiently speaking, but like the fact that their like murals can often just be a word ornamented.
Yes.
I feel that about language. But like when I'm writing notes, I start to do that, and I'm like, and I check out because now I'm doing another thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if
and for me, it's actually very similar, except for with writing words as drawing.
Yeah.
And
I'll do that too, or like
yeah.
whatever.
Like when I was younger, I was a huge, I don't know, like I had my own notebook that I drew sketches every day.
Yeah.
Like I was unable to focus on a television show when I was really young. I wasn't really able to watch like an actual, I believe the first like show I watched from beginning to end was because of Amanda.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until college.
What was it?
Friends.
Oh.
Yeah, because I was unable to pay attention. But
It's the worst sitcom of the 90s.
but yeah, that was the first one that that I watched from beginning to end, because like I would lose interest.
I've only watched like 5.
Did you? Yeah. But as a kid, it's like I just couldn't do it. So whenever like my brother Jonathan was different, like he was a huge movie buff.
Yeah.
He like watched all the shows.
Canadian now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he knew everything, and so like if I wanted to hang out with him, that's what he wanted to do, but I couldn't do it. So I used to pull up a table and just draw. Like, but by the end of my like adolescent years, I think I had like 400 drawings, because like I would draw constantly, and I was getting better. And so I remember this one time in high school was one of my teachers, Dr. Hippler.
Ew.
Yes, I know Hitler.
Wait, Dr. Hitler?
Yeah, yeah.
In high school?
Yeah.
Did he make you say doctor?
Yeah,
What a dick.
I know. Yeah, he was. but he's the one that taught me Latin, ancient Greek.
Well, that you got it from medical? Did you get it from like medical Latin or something?
No, he was a PhD doctor.
I know, but what was his subject?
Aquinas. He taught theology and
You said
everything. Yeah.
doctor. I'm like, he must be a physics teacher.
Yeah. No, yeah, I learned a lot from him, actually. He's probably the teacher I learned the most from. But he just made a quip about the barefoot pregnant housewife, and that just stuck in my head.
Wait,
and so
tell
I
me
drew.
what was the quip?
He just said, the barefoot pregnant housewife, and that's the only thing I heard. I was like, oh, so I started drawing it, and so for the entire class, I drew this entire elaborate scene of the pregnant housewife while the husband is like watching a football match, a soccer match for football.
Yeah.
And there's like a baby crawling and everything. It was like I just spent an entire hour just drawing this.
And you didn't retain anything.
I didn't retain anything.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Because it was more of a distraction than anything else. Mm-hmm. And so for me to retain, I just had to listen.
Yeah.
But reading, it's too distracting for me, because I start seeing things. There's also different things, like whenever you look at toner, you see like some splotches. And so like some of the things that I do, people think is weird. So I start going like this. I was like, I just, I don't know why. I just get distracted. I'm like, I just want to see whether.
Oh my God. If I'm reading something published and I see a typo.
Yes, that too. Yes.
I'm like, wow.
But some of these ink presses, some of these printing presses are pretty bad. And so like I notice normally like with B's and D's, you see some splotches in there, and then it begins to distract me. So I started to see a little bit more. I'm like,
and now you're hunting for them.
I'm hunting for them. Yes.
How many of these can I find on a page?
Yeah. And then when I was a kid, my dad had this, I still remember it. It was, magnifying glass where it had like a red rim and a gold handle. It's like super 80s. But then I would just like grab that. So I started looking.
My mom had one too.
Yes. So I started looking at it more. I was like, oh my gosh. And then it was like, to my brother, it's like, hey, Steven, look at this. When you look at it really closely, this looks like shit. And so we're just like, we started to look at things because it's just distracting.
It's an object.
It's an object, yes.
Yeah.
It's an object to be observed.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's not helpful for me. But when for me, and again, some people are different, but for me, for listening, it's different, because I can't just, especially if it's like somebody reading to me. This is why I say that even more so than like a audiobook. So like an audiobook, I remember the lady kept saying sexual personae. And so, and so for me, it was kind of distracting. Yeah, it was kind of distracting.
Every single audiobook we've listened to so far has had weird mispronunciations.
It did, yes, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. There was one, I remember, like, if I started to listen to it again, I could write you a list of all the things he mispronounced.
Yeah.
But he, I don't remember exactly what the sentence was, but he said something, a leader does something with consummate skill, but he says consummate. with consummate
really?
skill. And I'm like,
Yeah.
did no one
Yeah.
think how do they do this? Like, who's not watching him say that wrong? Sexual personae.
Yeah, sexual personae. So those can be minorly distracting, but it's not distracting as written work for me. And
Because my thing is, I get so distracted by how reverent I am of the written thing
Yes,
that I get
yeah, yeah.
distracted.
yes,
And you're
yeah.
so irreverent and hateful of the thing
Yes,
that you can't read. So we can't read for different, like, we're essentially illiterate. It's really hard for us to read for
I
different
know.
reasons. I get so fixated on what
Yes,
I'm doing
yeah.
out of reverence and love for looking at words.
yes.
I'm just like, ooh, that's a really nice looking word. I'm going to go write that.
Yeah. Not for me. I have to read things over and over again before I could actually grasp it. But if it is
I do,
said
but I
to
get
me-
so distracted.
I know it's for many reasons for me. It's a distraction. It's the act. It's laborious.
Because I
It's
actually
like-
can read quite well, but I get
Yeah.
so distracted by it.
Yeah.
Because it's active instead of passive. It's
It
an
is,
active
yes.
activity
Yes. Yeah.
instead
yeah.
of just
Yeah, so it really is an added thing in which I need to do in order to get the information. But like I said, for me, the best thing would be if somebody could read it for me.
But I get distracted doing everything. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm a horrible undiagnosed ADHD case.
Yeah,
I told you about that, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I think I honestly believe I'm a horrible undiagnosed dyslexia.
yeah.
I really do.
I think
because-
I just am like, I can't concentrate on anything for very long
Yeah.
at all. And the phone thing and everything like totally facilitated that getting way worse than it would
Oh,
have
yeah,
been in a
yeah,
different time period. But like, I can't concentrate on anything.
Yeah.
So when I like even audiobooks, I'm like, fuck. And then I have to go back 5 minutes. Cause I
Oh, do you?
like if
Yeah.
I'm watching a YouTube video, I can't go 2 minutes without going, I've missed it. And then I have to go back. I'm like,
Oh, really?
I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
concentrate
Yeah.
on anything. But like audiobooks do make it easier. Mm-hmm. I have to listen to them more than you do. Cause I'm like, wait,
Yeah, yeah.
I started looking at my hands.
I could do other activities and listen to audiobooks
can't.
and retain the information. Yeah.
That's how distractible I have
Yes,
to.
yeah.
But it's still better than having to read.
It is, yes. Yeah.
I can still listen to it at double speed.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I can get it, but I still really can't do much.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I'm worse off than you. Because I can't read because I literally get 2 sentences in and I'm like, I get so distracted. Like, what was that noise? I can't sleep because I get too distracted. Did you know about that?
No, I
I
didn't.
can't.
actually.
I have to sleep with a really loud fan because any little noise will keep me from sleeping. Because I'm like, what's that? What's that? Oh, what's that? What's
Yeah,
that?
that must be
What's that? What's that? What's that?
terrible,
What's that?
actually.
What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? And I just start to like want to kill myself. So
Yeah.
I just need to be sleeping. Like, oh, someone texted me. Oh, what's that?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, there's Truman. I'm gonna go walk around the house a little bit and go back to bed. And then it's like, this blanket feels funny. I'm gonna flip the pillow. I'm just trying to. I can't handle. That's why I think I'm actually
Yeah.
more autistic than you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
you want to get back to the thing? So.
Yeah, I guess we should.
Okay.
So we ended with the ipsum esse ipsum. So the listeners are probably just like, what the fuck are wrong with these guys?
No, it's good. People want
so-
to hear us just talk. We're hanging out. So
Yes.
the thing about good podcasts is
Yeah.
we're hanging out.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're hanging out with us.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. This isn't a lecture.
So this, so the last feature the other feature I wrote here is free will. So free will is
This is what specifies Catholicism.
Catholicism. Yes, yeah. So free will is actually a very uniquely traditional Christian Catholicism orthodoxy idea. And so again, the pagans had this idea of fate, that fate exists and there's nothing that you can do that actually could go against fate. While even though in Catholicism, if you read Augustine, Aquinas, if you read many of the other doctors of the church, there is a sense of predestination within their theology. The predestination only exists either like in the Thomistic sense, predestination exists insofar that there cannot exist anything outside of God. So
Well, the parameters are set.
right. It's a parameter as a sense.
Yeah.
So predestination exists there. The Augustinian sense is that that we cannot do any goodness outside of grace, and so grace is always given to us by God. So there is in Catholicism there is senses of predestination in that way, but but it doesn't violate. If you actually read the Catechism, it doesn't go against the idea of free will. And so free will in the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith is actually one of the most central ideas of one's salvation, right? And so, it's so strong in the Catholic faith that that divination. I don't know if you know what divination is, but divination is viewed as a mortal sin.
Yeah.
And so, like many people just relate this to astrology. So astrology.
Can we do an entire astrology episode?
We should, yeah.
Okay.
But astrology.
So don't shoot I won't too much.
Yeah, I won't. But astrology per se, basically the idea that the external environment affects your behavior and your way that you are, extends to the cosmos, is not viewed as evil by the church. But divination is the idea that you can predict one's behavior, one's future.
There's a difference between predicting and making sense of something.
Exactly, yeah. And so, like many people maybe don't know, but like Aquinas believed in many astrological ideas. The ideas that we're not only not controlled, but we're not only influenced by our immediate environment, like the social structures, the language, the government, and so on and so forth, but we're also influenced by our cosmo realities, such as the stars, the moons, the placements of all those things. And so those ideas isn't about astrology is what the church is against, but they're against divination, the idea that we can predict the future, or we say that somebody necessarily has to behave a certain way because of the astrological signs, is what they view.
Oh my God, I found Aquinas' natal chart.
Did you? Nice. What is it?
He's fucking Pisces. God.
Is he really?
A sad sack.
So yeah, the idea of free will, as opposed to fate, I would say is a very important aspect of the Catholic faith that is not pagan at all. And then the last one on here that we talked extensively on is natural law of morals. And so as opposed to the paganistic view that the gods dictate what is moral, in Catholicism was the natural law theory of morals, where morals is discovered by our interaction with reality. Because since God is being itself, God is goodness itself, God is beauty itself, God is truth itself, and so that the world, as we experience it, is a manifestation of God's of God's being. That morality is found in.
Okay, we don't know Aquinas' birthday, so.
Oh, okay.
We'll just. I don't know how they got through his Pisces.
Yeah. And so that's
So,
yeah.
Can I say something about astrology really quick? This is not our astrology episode. I might make this argument later.
Yeah.
And this would be an embarrassing thing to admit to some people, but I don't see the issue at all. So when I was in middle school, I started just I would just ask people their birthdays.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't sit there and go, I wouldn't be like, you're Sagittarius, blah, blah. I wouldn't just like talk. I'd just be like, what are you? And I've been my entire conscious life, I've just been observing people's birthdays, when they're born and where that corresponds astrologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And someone can hand me a natal chart and I can just go, okay. And just like, done. Like I just know exactly. And I obviously not know. I mean, no, because it requires belief. Like,
right, yeah.
But like, I can read it like a doctor reads a report for like a blood draw or something. Because it's an empirical study.
Yes, yeah.
And I just
it's empirical
so much
study
time
of
looking
people's
at
behavior.
Like I had a bunch of people at work print it off and I'd be like, I just look at it and be like, okay. And I just read it, and they're like, "Why?" And I'm like, "It's too much. Like I don't want to go into it right now." But I know exactly what this means.
Yeah.
And I don't know what point exactly I want to make, but like it really does bother me. I'm like on an astrology thought right now.
Maybe I shouldn't have used that as an
No,
example.
you can shove it
But
through.
yeah.
You can just shove through. I'm just,
But I do think that that deserves like
should
an
have
episode
no-
on its own, to be honest.
or at least part of a discussion.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Could be next week or something.
Yeah.
So,
And so going through each one of those
Yeah.
steps, hopefully people remember even our deviation of our tangent. But
just read the bullet points. Do you have the bold?
yes, and so I mean we already did, but so basically that there's metaphysical hylomorphism rather than dualism.
This is what makes Catholicism unique, and
Yes,
not pagan.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ipsum esse subsistence, the idea that there is no entity that we call God, but rather God is the act of being itself.
Okay.
That there's free will,
Yep.
that we're not fated for a certain way of being, but rather we can freely
Yep.
choose the gift of salvation. And the natural law theory as opposed to divine command theory, that God does not arbitrarily dictate morals, but rather morals are found within reality since they're manifestation of being.
Yeah.
And so I think those things are just, they're the most fundamental aspects, I think, of the philosophical and religious and theological beliefs that are so against paganism that we cannot, just because of the cosmetics, claim that Catholicism and paganism are actually closely related. So my last part of the notes, and then we probably go to your questions, is
You've answered it all.
okay, yeah. Okay, so why Protestantism and secularism is fundamentally more pagan. And so the reason why I think maybe it's not most people, but many people at least think that Protestantism and secularism is actually furthest away from paganism is because of iconoclasm. Is because both.
What's iconoclasm?
So iconoclasm is the rejection of icons. It's the rejection of statues, of paintings, of stained glass windows, of all those things.
Beauty.
Of beauty, yes. And so both Protestants and secularists...
Does the rejection of beauty kind of have roots in iconoclasm?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so iconoclasm was an early church heresy that was brought again back to life within Protestantism. And so as any, like you could go to literally any Protestant church. It doesn't matter what denomination it is,
Yeah.
right? It could be Methodist, Baptist, some kind of Calvinist denomination. You're not going to see a crucifix. You're not.
Well, a proper one.
You're going to see a cross. You might see a cross,
But you won't
that's
see-
empty. But
you
you're
won't
not gonna
see Christ on it.
Yes, you're not going to
Yeah.
see a crucifix. You're not going to see Christ on the cross. You're not going to see a statue of Mary.
Yeah.
You're not going to see the Holy Family, where you have the Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus. Unless it's Christmas. Yes, that's the only time the process make the exception, maybe. But something like strictly installed in a church, you're not going to see. You're not going to see those things. You're not going to see the John the Baptist statue or a painting. Like it is the rejection of all physical components because Protestantism in general believes that's idolatry. Is that when you have a statue?
Well, they don't understand what veneration is.
They don't.
As opposed to worship.
And so, in many regions of Catholicism, one of the traditions you do in Easter is literally kiss the foot of the cross.
Yeah.
And so, I remember we went to a Polak church in Pennsylvania. And in there, they would take down the crucifix, like it's giant. I'm talking about like life-size crucifix, and then people will go to it and kiss the foot of the cross, literally, right?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
It is. It's a beautiful experience. So you would have all these physical things, and so many of the Protestant churches claim this as paganistic, is that you're worshiping the statues, you're worshiping the paintings, you're worshiping the saints or the Virgin Mary.
Well, it's just if God is being, you are partaking of God by doing something.
Yes.
Action.
Yes.
You're doing an action.
Yeah.
That's what a ritual is.
It is, you're right.
Partaking of an action.
And so I think the lack of rituals is what makes people think that Protestantism and secularism is not pagan. Is because one central feature of paganism
well, I think
was
the early
the
pagans
ritual.
understood that.
Yes, they understood
Yeah.
rituals, right?
Yeah.
They had carnivals. They had their version of carnivals, right? Carnivals is strictly Catholic, but they had their version of carnivals. They had their worshiping of
This is why.
Dionysus.
So this is actually something interesting. That Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate holidays.
They don't at
I think
all,
it's
yes.
actually the most rationally coherent in
Protestant
their
view.
framework.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and why most
They don't
Protestants
celebrate birthdays.
Yes.
So, okay, there's nothing to celebrate.
I mean, the listeners could look this up in history, but in the founding, people of the U.S., mostly the Puritans and many other Protestant denominations, did not celebrate Christmas, for example. They virtually believed that Catholics took a pagan god and made Christmas out of old pagan rituals of
which is not true at all.
right, which is not true at all, right? Of the winter solstice.
A lot of people still think that.
They still
It's
think
like
that.
Not true.
Yes.
No.
And so many Protestants in the United States didn't celebrate Christmas, not even up until the mid 1800s.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about a large part of the U.S. history, Christmas is not a part of it. And then it didn't even become a staple in the American world until fucking Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Right? Coca-Cola.
Santa Claus.
Yes,
and
Santa
stuff,
Claus
yeah.
made it central part of our culture. But for a large part of the U.S. culture, because of its puritanical and Protestant background, Christmas was not a staple. They didn't celebrate Christmas. Many Protestant religions didn't celebrate Christmas at all. And so when we think of many of the contemporary Christians now who are Protestant, we think of them as being like Christmas-loving people. For the large part of its history, that just wasn't the case. They like the certain governors used to, they wouldn't arrest them, but they would give tickets to Italian and Irish Catholic homes who would celebrate Christmas. Because the traditional way that Irish and Roman Catholics celebrated Christmas was Christmas Eve. And so in South America, it's still done this way in Italy.
Well, it's like you start on Christmas Eve.
You
and
do,
go
yes.
as long until everybody
You do,
passes
yes.
out.
And so kids will like celebrate. They will open the presents late at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a lot of the Italian and Irish immigrants were in the U.S., they would do the same tradition where they would go and they would open the presents up at midnight and they would play in the streets in the little like Italian and Irish communities. And then there were certain governors that would literally take away their toys and issue curfew tickets to the parents and be like, no, now we have a curfew law. You can't be past 11 o'clock, before the eve of Christmas. And so, no, I mean, Protestantism was not, for the large part of its history, a Christmas loving religion. Because of iconoclasm, they didn't believe that you should celebrate these holidays. They didn't have holidays. The term holy day comes from Catholicism. So you had holy days, right?
Well, that's again why I think that
yes, yeah,
the Jehovah's Witness or
they are more accurate.
Seventh-day Adventists. I think,
Yes,
are
yeah,
similar.
they're actually more accurate to traditional Protestantism. Is that no, you don't have holy days, and so
meaning that they're more coherent. To
they're more
their own
coherent.
framework.
Yeah. And so when you look at like Catholic calendars, there's a feast day like every day for a different saint. And so you have a feast day for this saint, for that saint. Yeah. And so if you were of that region, you would celebrate that feast day. You would get drunk. You would eat. You would have a community of people coming together and dancing and whatever. Mm-hmm. But because of iconoclasm, I think many people view both Protestants and secularists as so far removed from paganism, and iconoclasm
because that
goes back to its cosmetics.
The what's the word? The parallel in not necessarily the character of rituals between the two, but the fact that both have rituals.
Yes.
Between, I don't want to say both because paganism doesn't refer to anything specific, but pagan religious systems or whatever. Ideological systems have rituals and Catholics have rituals. That doesn't make the rituals similar at all.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Fundamentally, they're way distinct. Mm-hmm. But because Protestantism and secularism doesn't have those rituals,
because rituals are the beautiful part.
It is.
When you say that Protestantism is paganism without the beauty, it's like or the fun.
Yeah.
It's like the rituals are the beautiful and the fun part.
It is. Yes. Yeah. And they don't have that.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I think, we view it that way. But when you look at it fundamentally, Protestantism and secularism, especially contemporary secularism, is very, very pagan in their ideas. And so Protestantism began to adopt many of the dualistic metaphysics again. And so normally, you could watch The Simpsons, you could watch whatever, right?
Yeah.
Culturally speaking, and also just... I guess philosophically speaking, when you read, Barth or Calvin or whatever. Protestant thinkers, as well as their social structures, they view heaven as, again, a place in which your soul goes. It goes back to that paganistic view where you have the separation of the body and soul, and the soul goes into this afterlife. The difference is that within Protestantism, you have a happy afterlife. You just don't go to hell. You have to go to heaven or hell, which they take from Catholicism, which they take from Christianity. But they paganize it. Now it's just a place where your soul goes. You're no longer just a resurrected, like a literal zombie, a resurrected body as Christ was. Now it's a place where your soul goes, and where your soul goes, you
also go there immediately after you die.
You go, immediately, right? Yeah, there's no cleansing. There's nothing. And then there's also this this idea of corporeality as being in some way so lacking from goodness that any activities of the flesh is the most evil, right? And so this is where you get pietism and Puritanism.
This is interesting because so in Protestant theology, and much of pagan theology, if it's analyzed correctly, is that the spiritual world, they might call it, or the spiritual dimension, the formal reality, is purely good, only, and that substantial reality is only evil, and that anything you do wrong, the character of sin is subjecting the spiritual to the corporeal. That's what all of it. That's why Puritans are so obsessed with sex and drinking and all of the corporeal pleasures. Except Jesus was fat, so I don't know. But
according to Pastor Kent.
So if I can't believe how many times we said his name. He's going to sue us.
I know. He's a public figure. Fuck him.
It's journalism. So if Christ is required to come again at some point, if man is to be fully manifest again in his nature, which is essentially what that means. If the formal is only good, he's only here to purify the corporeal. Because the formal is already good. So if you just die before he gets here, you got a ticket. Like just die first. It'll be fine.
It's like the Protestants really do have this idea that your main goal is to get rid of your body. That's what it is. It's like, this is dirty, this is gross, I have to eat.
You just have to suffer under your body.
You have to suffer in your body, and then when you finally die, you get rid of this body and you enter heaven with your soul fully cleansed and worship God for the rest of eternity. That is the Protestant worldview, is that the flesh is dirty. There's something gross about it. And we talked about this like in the sexual persona episode, and this is where sex in the Protestant world is different from the Catholic world, where in the Catholic world, sex was inherently good, that can be perverted by...
We've talked about it many times.
Yes. And then when the Protestant world, sex is inherently dirty, that can be sanctified by certain activities. And so this comes because of dualism, and so this is where Protestantism shares within with paganism. Now, in the same way, secularism also shares within paganism. So now you have within a sexual ideology, because both of them really hinders on sex. Sexual ideology and secularism is that you have this sexual identity that doesn't necessarily correlate with your body. So now you have, again, the duality of reality, is that the secularist believes full-heartedly that you can be born in the wrong body. They believe that you have this soul, this mind, whatever they want to call it. If they don't want to call it soul because they think it's spooky.
Or that the soul and the mind can be incongruous in any way.
Yes, in some way, but you can have this separation. You can have this separation where there is this intellect, there is this mind that is really a female born in a man's body, and that you must correct that dirty body by cutting off your dick, taking hormones to grow breasts.
Well, it is kind of interesting because it used to be that the solution was to die.
Yes.
It's like, we figured out how to correct the body.
Die.
You don't have to die anymore.
Yes, now you don't have to die, right, yes.
To correct this.
Now you can correct it. And so both Protestantism and secularism share in dualism, right? They share in this kind of metaphysical understanding of reality that Catholics don't. Which is why, again, what's one of the features why we say it's more close to paganism than Catholicism is. The other one, the famous line of Calvin, predestination and faith alone, it goes back to fate. It goes back that you do not have any say in your salvation at all. Right? They say that, it's, and I know it's mostly tailored to Calvinism, but really Protestantism at large is that you don't have control over that. That fundamentally God has elected you to go to heaven and has given you grace to go to heaven. And that once you're saved forever. There is no, once you say your saving prayer, you're saved until death. That there is no point in which you're not saved. Again, this goes back to the idea of fate. God fated you to go to heaven. God fated you to go to hell. And yet your main goal is to accept the will of God. Your main goal is, again, to accept fate. It no longer is that you must partake in your salvation by accepting the gift of God. Now it is, you just have to accept the will of God. If God fated you to be this way, you must begin to accept the fate in which God has given you. Yeah. And so, again, that is just a very paganistic view. Then when you go to secularism, it's the fucking same thing. Is that you are fated for certain realities. So that it goes back to transgenderism. You didn't, or just even homosexuality. It's like you didn't choose to be gay. You didn't choose to put your dick in another man's ass. You were born that way, and your main goal is accepting you. Be true to you. This is all of the ideologies within secularism. It's always everything. Be true to you, because why? Because whatever kind of person you are was fated for you even before birth. And that your main goal is accepting yourself, is being true to who you are, accepting your truth, and so on and so forth. That secularism has these paganistic ideas of fate. And then the last one I put here was summum bonum. It's taken from Kant, one of the great Protestant thinkers of the time.
Great.
Yes. One of the influential Protestant thinkers of the time. Yeah. And so, Protestant again goes back to this idea the pagans had that God, since God is a en summum God within Protestantism, it's no longer the active being, but the biggest being. And then now God institutes through his divine will morality. Mm-hmm. That arbitrarily these things are not, that God is not beholden to these virtues, but rather God invokes these virtues onto being. And so things like the problem of evil for many Protestants can just be excused by it's just the will of God. You don't know it. You're too stupid to know.
Which turns people off.
Which turns people off.
Suffering. It's like,
yes, yeah.
My father just died of cancer.
Yeah.
Like that. That's the will of God. Okay.
Yeah.
God sucks. Like,
yeah. So it's just the will of God. You just don't know. You're too stupid to know. God is so much greater than you.
You're just not listening.
You're just not listening. He has such a big intellect.
You're not listening.
You gotta listen
closely enough to hear how it's good that your dad just died of cancer.
Yes. Or that your 3-year-old daughter got raped by your cousin.
Until she died,
and then he mutilated the body and fed it to his dogs. Yeah. It's like it's the
will
of God.
You're just not listening.
Yeah, you're not listening. You're just too dumb to know why that's actually good. It's good for you. It's good for you that it happened to your daughter. Good will come of it. Again, because it goes back to this pagan idea, both of fate and both of divine command theory of morals. It doesn't go back to, it doesn't go towards the Catholicism. And so, even though I think because the cosmetics are different, Protestantism and secularism are actually much more pagan fundamentally than Catholicism ever was. The reason why Western civilization boomed throughout the last 2,000 years was because of Catholicism. It was because Catholicism rejected many of these paganistic ideas. But the reason why we're degrading again is because we have adopted many of these paganistic ideas again. We have become Protestant. We've become secular, and in that sphere, we reject everything. We reject former reality. We reject truth. We reject goodness and being itself, to the point that now we just we believe a system of physical reality that is pure potency rather than pure act, and that's why I would claim that that's completely regressive. But I don't know if you have anything more to say about it.
I don't. What's really funny, so if I take this, so we're at 3,532 bars.
Yeah.
Okay, 40. So let's say 3,540 bars times 120 beats per minute.
Yeah.
So it's 420. So we have recorded 424,800 beats, roughly, divided by 60 beats.
Yeah.
Which is how many a minute? So 7,080. So if I divide that again, that means that we've been recording for 118 minutes divided by 60 again. So we've recorded for 1.96 hours. And the fact that I have to do that every time because I just want to know how long we've been going. It's incredible.
We're at 1 hour and 58 minutes.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. So
Well, she could see it on hers.
I can do algebra.
Yeah.
I know variables.
Good.
I could build a bridge.
Yeah, I can build a bridge.
Be an engineer. Just tell me how to do it. Anyway,
Yeah, it's more than a
we
woman
don't.
could do.
I have to piss really bad.
Okay. Do we need to pause?
We can pause. Do you want to record more after I pee?
Oh, we could just end now.
Whatever you want to do.
No, I think it probably
that's a
ends
good
good
point.
here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we could end it here.
Cool and
Personally.
exciting things down the pike here.
Yes.
Stay tuned. We'll talk later.
Yes.
Bye.